It was 9:58 a.m. when Walter Jennings pushed open the gleaming glass doors of LaRue Luxe Boutique, 2 minutes before the store's official opening time. The bell above the entrance gave a soft chime, but it didn't take long for every head in the store to turn. Not because he was loud, not because he did anything unusual, but because he was old, black, and his shoes were dusty. Walter walked slowly, as men with bad knees do. His shoulders were curved inward, his gait deliberate, and he wore a well-worn cardigan that had been mended 3 times. A wide-brimmed hat sat low on his head. In his left hand he held a small black cane, the kind that looked more ceremonial than medical. At the counter stood a tall, sleek white woman in her late 30s, with red lipstick so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. Her name tag read Brooke. She didn't smile. Instead, she glanced at her co-worker, whispered something under her breath, and gave a performative sigh. Then, with a voice dipped in cold syrup, she said, "Sir, we're not open yet." Walter paused. He removed his hat respectfully. "It's 10 a.m. now." She looked at the wall clock. It was, but she didn't acknowledge it. "What exactly are you looking for?" Walter blinked. "Just browsing, miss." Brooke gave him a tight smile. "Everything in this store is handcrafted and imported. Our pieces start at $2,000. So if you're just browsing—" She let the sentence hang like perfume in the air. Sweet, nasty. Walter nodded slowly. "You don't want me in here." "It's not that, sir," she said too quickly. "We just try to keep the traffic limited to serious clientele." "Because I don't look serious enough." "Because you're—" She stopped herself, but it was too late. The tone had said what her words didn't. Walter looked around. Polished marble floors, crystal lighting, velvet-lined handbags sitting on white pedestals like museum pieces. A store like this wasn't made for a man who walked like time had taken its toll. He gave a polite nod. "No trouble, ma'am," and turned to leave. But as he reached for the door, another voice stopped him. "Excuse me, sir." A young man in a gray suit had just entered the store from the back. Sharp, mid-30s, designer glasses. Name tag, Eli, assistant manager. "May I help you?" Brooke stepped forward. "He was just leaving." "I wasn't speaking to you," Eli replied, without looking at her. He turned back to Walter. "Please, anything I can show you?" Walter tilted his head. "She says everything in here's for real customers." Eli smiled gently. "Well, my grandfather always told me you treat every person like they own the building, because one day they just might." That made Walter chuckle, just a little. "That your grandfather's words?" "Yes, sir," Walter nodded. "Smart man." He looked back once at Brooke, who was now staring daggers at both of them, then back to Eli. "Maybe I'll come back another time." Eli said nothing, just opened the door for him, nodded once, and watched the old man walk out. But Walter wasn't gone for good. He was just getting started. What Brooke didn't know, what no one in that boutique knew, was that Walter Jennings wasn't just some tired old man with soft shoes and a cane. He was the man who used to clean the floors of this mall before he bought his first building. He was the man who read the Wall Street Journal by candlelight after working 14-hour shifts. He was the man who built a real estate empire while the world kept trying to hand him a mop. And for the last 6 months, he'd been in quiet negotiations to buy the entire shopping complex that LaRue Luxe was sitting in. But that morning, he had just wanted to buy his granddaughter a birthday bag, and instead, they'd handed him a reminder. Walter Jennings was born in 1947 in a one-bedroom shotgun house on the south side of Montgomery, Alabama. His mother was a housekeeper, his father a field hand who came home with hands like cracked leather and a voice worn thin by southern heat. Walter learned early what it meant to be invisible. When he was 8, he held the door open for a white woman outside a pharmacy. She didn't thank him. She didn't smile. She just stepped over his shadow like it didn't belong on the same ground. That night, Walter asked his mama, "Why don't people see us?" She gave him a tired smile and said, "They see us, baby. That's the problem." He got his first job at 13, sweeping floors at Franklin Hardware, 75 cents an hour. He saved every dollar in a shoebox under his bed. By 18, he had $892, enough for a semester at the local community college. He studied business even though he didn't know what he'd do with it. But numbers? Numbers didn't lie like people did. At 23, Walter was working as a janitor in a downtown high-rise. He mopped floors, scrubbed toilets, emptied trash in offices that looked like kingdoms to a kid raised on powdered milk and biscuits. One day, a banker left his Wall Street Journal in the break room. Walter picked it up. Didn't understand a single line, so he checked it out from the library, read it cover to cover. Then again. Then every day, for the next 30 years. In 1978, he bought his first duplex, saved for 4 years, took a loan from a black-owned credit union, fixed the plumbing himself. He rented to 2 single mothers for less than market rate. 5 years later, he sold it for a profit, bought 2 more, then 4, then an entire block. Still wore janitor clothes, still cleaned his own gutters. But now, he owned the buildings. By the late 90s, Walter owned 47 properties in 4 states. But he still drove a used Buick, still wore patched-up sweaters, still walked slow, not just from age, but because he never wanted to forget how it felt to be looked down on. When his wife passed in 2006, he almost gave it all up. They'd been married 42 years. She was his fire, his balance, his reason. On her final night, she took his hand and whispered, "You built a kingdom, Walter. Now bless more than just our name." So he did. He set up scholarships for black students who were first in their families to go to college. He funded community gardens in food deserts. He never told the press, because he wasn't building a legacy for attention. He was building it for healing. But the mall, that was different, because that mall was the same place where he once mopped floors in 1972, where he was told to use the back elevator, where people dropped change instead of handing it to him. And now he was 3 weeks away from signing the paperwork to buy the entire property, including the store where Brooke told him to leave. He didn't want revenge. He wanted a seat at the table, because he'd spent enough years cleaning under it. 3 weeks later, the ink was dry. The mall, its parking garage, and all 7 surrounding buildings had a new owner. Walter Jennings signed the final documents in a quiet, wood-paneled law office. No reporters, no photos. Just a handshake from the broker who whispered, "You just bought half the city's retail footprint." Walter nodded slowly. "All I ever wanted," he said, "was a place they couldn't push me out of." The first thing he did wasn't flashy. He didn't fire anyone, didn't raise the rent, didn't plaster his name across the food court. Instead, he made one call. To Eli, the assistant manager from LaRue Lux, the one who had treated him with dignity. "Mr. Jennings," Eli answered, surprised. "You busy, son?" No, sir." "Good. I'd like to have a conversation. Coffee's on me." They met at a quiet cafe tucked behind a used bookstore. Eli wore a tie, nervous hands, too many questions. Walter just stirred his tea. "You treated me like a man that day. I just did what I thought was right. You did more than that," He leaned forward. "Tell me something, Eli. What do you want 5 years from now?" Eli hesitated. No one had asked him that before. "I want to run something real. Build something that matters. Not just punch numbers and lock up a register." Walter nodded. "I've got something in mind." The next morning, LaRue Lux opened like any other day. Brooke came in 15 minutes late, sipping an overpriced iced caramel drink, sunglasses on her head, scrolling through her phone. Eli was already behind the counter, unusually composed. He handed her a letter. "From corporate," he said. Brooke opened it with one manicured hand, read it once, then again. Then slowly her cheeks drained of color. "You're joking." "No," Eli said quietly. "You told a man he didn't belong here. That man owns this entire mall now, and he's converting this space into something better." "Better? This store is luxury." "Luxury without integrity is just expensive insecurity," he replied. She blinked. He remained still. "So, you're firing me?" Eli shook his head. "No, just letting you know your lease ends in 30 days. Good luck." That week, posters started appearing throughout the property. "Coming soon. The Common Ground Marketplace. Black-owned brands, local designers, cultural booksellers, community-first retail." People noticed. So did the news. "Retired janitor buys mall that once denied him service." "Elderly black man turns old luxury store into equity hub." The story exploded on social media. But Walter, he didn't talk to the press. He just walked the grounds every morning, stopped to greet janitors by name, helped grandmothers carry bags to their cars, picked up trash if he saw it on the ground. And every day at 9:58 a.m., he'd stop in front of the LaRue Lux storefront, now being remodeled. Not to gloat, but to remember. 6 months after the boutique closed, the Common Ground Marketplace opened its doors. No red ribbon, no press conference, just the sound of a live saxophone near the entrance, the smell of fresh coffee from a black-owned cafe, and the joyful voices of kids painting murals with a local youth nonprofit. Where there were once cold glass shelves and overpriced handbags, now stood hand-built booths made by local artists, shelves of shea butter, racks of hand-woven fabrics, stacks of books written by authors who looked like the kids browsing them, and at the center of it all, a simple wooden bench with a bronze plaque. Mr. Jennings' bench, for those who remember where they started. Eli was now the general manager of the entire space. He hired high school interns, hosted weekend business boot camps, set up a mentorship program for teen entrepreneurs. Walter still came by once a week, never to inspect, just to listen. He'd ask each vendor how things were going, what they needed, what dreams they still hadn't told anyone. He made everyone feel seen. One Saturday afternoon, a little girl walked in with her mom. She couldn't have been more than 9. Pink beads in her braids, wide eyes, and a quiet curiosity. She stopped at a booth that sold handmade journals and whispered, "I want to be a writer one day." Walter overheard. He knelt down slowly beside her. "You will," he said. She looked up. "You think so?" He smiled. "I know so." He reached into his cardigan pocket, pulled out a smooth leather notebook, and placed it in her hands. "Start with this." Her name was Marley. 10 years later, she would be the first in her family to go to college on a full scholarship from the Jennings Foundation. She would become a teacher, then a principal, and one day, standing in front of hundreds at a graduation ceremony, she'd say, "I owe everything to a man I didn't even know, a man who saw me when I didn't yet see myself." Walter passed away in his sleep at age 88. No headlines, no ceremony, just a handwritten note taped to his bench the next morning. He built a table where others once closed the door. The marketplace stayed open late that day. They played his favorite jazz album from the speaker system. People lit candles along the edge of the plaza,